Welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video. Today I'm going to talk to you about God, obviously, and free will, obviously. Two of my favourite topics. Free will, how do we define free will? So I'm going to define it as the real ability to consciously and rationally choose otherwise in a given situation. What this means is sometimes summed up in what's called the garden of forking paths, or the principle of alternate possibilities. That's this idea that at any given point, so you get to a point in time, at this point you could choose to do this or you could choose to do that. And if we carried on living and then rewound the universe to this exact same point, everything about the universe is the same because it's essentially the same universe. You really could choose other than what you initially did, given that everything down to every wave function, every bit of prior learning you've had is identical, is the same. So what could underwrite a different choice? Because if it's nothing to do with your life and who you are and what you've learned and every bit of variable in existence, then, and you choose differently to how you chose originally, then what could underwrite that decision? It looks nothing more than random, because there can be no cause or reason. This is why Daniel Dennett says that, you know, for libertarian free will to make sense, you need determinism. You need causal determination in order for free will to be rational, conscious, and have kind of meaning rather than looking random. Anyway, so that's basically your free will problem. And as I've said before, there are loads of, there's lots of empirical evidence to support that as well. But I'm going to refer you back to Arthur Schopenhauer's famous saying, man can do what he wills, but he can't will what he wills. Which is to say that, I can wake up in the morning, get up and say, do you know what? I want a cup of tea this morning. So I think I'm going to make myself a cup of tea because that's what I want. It feels like I've got free will, but my desires, that which I want, is already determined. It's not like I wake up in the morning and have all these options and choose something I really want to do just out of no other causal determination, because again, that looks like random. I want a cup of tea because I like tea, and I like tea because of all the stuff that's gone on in my life before, my genetics, my biology, and what I'm used to, so on and so forth. Now, let's transfer that thought over to God. So God has these characteristics of being, if you adhere to classical theism, what I call omnigod, the triadic God that has omniscience, full knowledge, omnipotence, full power, all powerful, and omnibenevolence, all loving. And we can also throw into the omniscience mix divine foreknowledge, so knowledge of all future events that are yet to take place, and even hypotheticals, what could take place in a given situation. Okay, so God's got all these omni characteristics. Can God really be free to choose what he wants to do? So when you say to theists, surely God could command genocide or rape, you look at these events in the Hebrew Bible and say, well, look, God countenanced slavery and ordered genocide. And say, God wouldn't do that. It's not in his nature. Okay, fair enough. If it's not in his nature, then you're saying God literally couldn't order genocide, even if God wanted to. And we get into this problem that it looks like God's on these railroad tracks that he can't deviate from because of God's nature. His own nature, and I say its nature, is very robustly defined in terms of omni, omni, omni. So God really couldn't choose to do anything other than that which was most loving. And it's a bizarre scenario where the supreme being in the world is effectively a divine robot and has to do that which is most loving. and would have all calculations in advance of choosing any given way, but has to choose in a way that fits in line with its perfect and all-loving nature. So that's the first problem. So God can't have free will. I can't see how free will can make any sense given God's nature, and God can't change its nature. It's immutable. And the idea that God is unchanging and immutable is one that you see bandied around quite a lot. But I don't see that God could be changeable given the constraints of those aspects of God's nature. Okay, fair enough. Let's park that idea for now. So God can't have free will as far as I'm concerned. Would always choose the most loving. Now let's think about God's omniscience, and in particular God's divine foreknowledge. So God knows all future events before they come to pass, and has designed the world to be that way even. But let's think about God's own foreknowledge of itself. So if God really does have divine foreknowledge, and I think that notion is hugely problematic and arguably the most problematic aspect of God's characteristics, I think divine foreknowledge is a right thorn in the side of theists. But let's assume he's got it. I keep saying it. So God knows all future events, and all future events include God and God's actions. In other words, God knows all of its own decisions and events that involve God going forward. So if it predicts that at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, it's going to come down to Earth and appear to Billy, right? God can't not do that, because if God doesn't do that, then God's foreknowledge is fallible. If God predicts of itself what it's going to do in the future and doesn't do that, it renders God's own foreknowledge incorrect, erroneous, fallible. But the theists claim God is infallible. God's knowledge is infallible. It has perfect knowledge, omniscience, perfect divine foreknowledge. So it can't act contrary to its own predictions. Whatever it has predicted it will do going forward for the rest of time, God has to do. There is no way out of this unless you are going to allow God to be fallible, to have incorrect predictions about the future. And in that case, God is also not omniscient. So not only is God defined by its knowledge in such a way that it appears it would have no free will at all, but God's, all those characteristics of God's nature put God on train tracks of, being constrained by its own nature. But also God's own foreknowledge means that every single event, decision, moment of God's existence is predicted, and God cannot veer from that path. There is no, well, I could do this and I could do that, because God's already predicted its own behaviour. So God will do this and God will do that infallibly. There is no deliberation. There is no, let's think about this, let's evaluate and then make a decision. God is effectively a robot. God is an automaton doing that which it is effectively programmed, that's a problematic word, is determined to do. God cannot have free will. Something to think about. Anyway, as ever, question everything apart from anything I say. No, particularly anything I say, because that is how, and letting me know that is how I change and adapt my own views so that they become more and more accurate. Please like and subscribe and set up playlists and listen to my videos even when you are not in the room. And then maybe I might get 4,000 watch hours one day, 1 year. Anyway, thanks for checking this out, and stay safe.